The city never sleeps, but for some, it's a different kind of restless. On the corner of 5th and Broadway, amidst the towering skyscrapers and bustling lights, an old man sat huddled under a threadbare blanket. His name was Ethan, a once brilliant inventor turned shadow of himself after life dealt its cruelest blows. His legs, paralyzed from a long-forgotten accident, were only half the story. Tonight, Ethan's fate would cross paths with a group of bandits who were about to learn that not all treasures shine in gold. The air was biting, and the familiar chill of winter gripped the streets of New York. Ethan sat silently on the sidewalk, his wheelchair parked beside him. His hands trembled as he clutched a tattered sign that read, "Disabled, hungry, anything helps." The crowd bustled by, oblivious to his quiet existence. Just another forgotten soul in the vast cityscape. At the same time, a group of rough-looking men strolled into view. They were loud, clad in patched jackets and scuffed boots, their laughter echoing against the glass storefronts. Known locally as the Iron Crew, they weren't the most notorious bandits, but their mischief had earned them a mixed reputation. Among their ringleader, Travis, and his cronies, Liam, Carl, and the youngest Mikey, they had spent the evening plotting their next petty heist. As their laughter faded, Travis's eyes landed on Ethan. He elbowed Liam, smirking, "Look at this guy. Bet he's collected more in spare change than we did robbing that liquor store last week." Carl chuckled, pulling a crumpled dollar bill from his pocket. "Hey, pal, want some charity?" His tone was mocking as he dangled the bill in Ethan's direction. Mikey, the youngest and quietest of the crew, shifted uncomfortably. "Leave him alone," he muttered, but his voice was drowned by the others' jeers. Ethan didn't flinch. He looked up, his piercing blue eyes meeting Travis's. "Kindness isn't weakness," he said, his voice soft but firm. For a moment, the crew fell silent, caught off guard. Then Travis let out a laugh. "All right, old man. Let's see how far kindness gets us." He motioned for the others to toss their scraps of cash at Ethan. A few crumpled bills and coins fell into his lap, but something in Ethan's quiet resilience gnawed at Mikey. "Let's grab him a hot meal instead," Mikey blurted out, earning raised eyebrows from the others. To everyone's surprise, Travis shrugged. "Why not? Let's call it charity." The crew stepped into the nearby diner and returned moments later with a steaming bag of food. Ethan's weary face lit up with gratitude as he accepted it. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. The bandits thought nothing of it, laughing as they walked away. But by sunrise, they would come to realize that this single act of kindness had set something extraordinary into motion. The morning came slowly, the city stirring to life with the hum of traffic and distant horns. Ethan remained in his usual spot, the remnants of the meal clutched in his lap. The scent of coffee and bacon still lingered faintly in the air. Despite his tattered appearance, a spark had returned to his eyes, an ember of hope that hadn't been there in years. Meanwhile, the Iron Crew had regrouped at their usual hangout, an old abandoned warehouse near the river. It was their makeshift base, cluttered with stolen goods, mismatched furniture, and the faint smell of oil and metal. Travis sat in his self-declared throne, an old leather armchair, while the others sorted through the spoils of their last job. Mikey, however, was unusually quiet. He leaned against a rusted filing cabinet, lost in thought. "You guys ever think about what we're doing?" he asked hesitantly. Carl snorted. "What, you suddenly got a conscience after last night? It was just a burger and fries, Mikey." "No," Mikey said, his tone firmer. "I mean, yeah, the food thing was nice, but didn't you see his face? That guy was actually grateful, like we gave him more than just food." Travis rolled his eyes, sipping from a can of beer. "Look, kid, if you're getting all sentimental about some old homeless guy, maybe you're in the wrong crew." But Mikey didn't back down. "What if we did something different? Like just for one day, no heists, no scams, just something good." Liam glanced at Travis, gauging his reaction. The leader's expression darkened. "We don't do good, Mikey. That's not who we are." Unbeknownst to them, the morning held a strange twist. Back at the corner of 5th and Broadway, Ethan's usual spot had drawn an unusual amount of attention. Passers-by were stopping, not to ignore or mock him, but to look at something beside him. A small, intricately wrapped package sitting neatly on the ground. Ethan, too, was baffled. He had woken to find the package there, its gold ribbon glinting in the early sunlight. Attached was a note, written in an elegant hand. "Kindness begets kindness." Curiosity won over hesitation. Ethan carefully unwrapped the package, revealing an old but pristine pocket watch. Its surface gleamed, and etched on the back were the words, "Time is precious. Use it well." The peculiar gift sparked murmurs among the onlookers. "Who would leave that for him?" a woman asked. "Is it worth something?" another speculated. Ethan didn't have answers. All he knew was that something about the watch felt significant. Holding it in his hands, he felt a warmth he couldn't explain. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of what he couldn't yet say. By mid-morning, word of the mysterious gift reached the Iron Crew through one of their informants. "You remember that old guy you fed last night?" the man said, barging into the warehouse. "Someone left him a fancy pocket watch this morning. Looks valuable." Travis's ears perked up. "Valuable, you say?" "Yeah, real old. But probably worth a fortune. Looks like it's made of gold." Travis grinned, leaning forward in his chair. "Well and well. Looks like we're heading back to Broadway." As the crew made their way through the city, Mikey felt a growing unease. He couldn't shake the memory of Ethan's grateful expression, or the strange sense that last night's act had triggered something far bigger than any of them realized. But Travis was already formulating a plan. If the watch was as valuable as their informant claimed, it wouldn't stay in Ethan's hands for long. When they arrived, Ethan was still sitting in his spot, the watch held tightly in his hands. He looked up as the group approached, his expression guarded. "Back so soon?" he asked. Travis crouched beside him, his grin wolfish. "Nice little trinket you've got there, old man. Mind if we take a look?" Ethan hesitated, his fingers tightening around the watch. "It's not for sale," he said firmly. Carl laughed. "I assumed we weren't planning on paying." But before they could make a move, something unexpected happened. A man stepped out from the crowd, a tall figure in a dark coat, his face partially hidden by the brim of his hat. His voice was calm but commanding. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Travis turned sharply, sizing up the stranger. "And who the hell are you?" The man stepped closer, revealing sharp features and piercing gray eyes. "Just someone who appreciates the value of kindness," he said. "Unlike you." The tension was palpable as the crowd grew larger, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Travis's bravado faltered, if only for a moment, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "This isn't your business," he spat. "Walk away." The man smiled faintly, his demeanor unshaken. "You're right, it isn't my business, but I'd think twice before crossing someone like him." He nodded toward Ethan, who sat quietly, his expression unreadable. And for the first time, the Iron Crew began to sense that Ethan wasn't just an ordinary man, and that this stranger might not be either. The stranger's presence seemed to shift the energy of the entire scene. Travis, usually unshaken by any confrontation, narrowed his eyes. "What's so special about this guy, huh? He's just some bum on the street." The man in the dark coat smirked, crossing his arms. "You think kindness is weakness, don't you? That's your first mistake." Travis barked a laugh, though there was an edge to it now. "Oh, you've got guts, I'll give you that. But this is my turf, and I don't take kindly to people sticking their noses where they don't belong." The crowd, which had been watching silently, seemed emboldened by the stranger's calm demeanor. A woman called out, "Leave the poor man alone." A few others murmured in agreement. Ethan, still seated, studied the stranger with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. The watch in his hand felt warm, almost alive, as if it pulsed with the energy of the unfolding confrontation. Travis took a step closer to the stranger, his posture tense. "I don't know who you think you are, but Travis..." Mikey's voice cut through the air, startling everyone. The youngest member of the Iron Crew stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "Maybe we should just walk away." Travis spun to face him, disbelief and fury etched on his face. "What did you just say?" Mikey swallowed hard. "I mean, we don't even know what's going on here. That guy..." He nodded toward the stranger. "He doesn't seem like someone we want to mess with." The tension between Travis and Mikey was thick enough to cut, but before Travis could respond, the stranger spoke again. "Smart kid," he said, nodding approvingly at Mikey. "Oh, you should listen to him." Travis's jaw tightened, but before he could escalate further, the stranger turned his attention to Ethan. "Mind if I sit for a moment?" Ethan nodded slowly, gesturing to the empty spot beside him. The stranger lowered himself onto the pavement, his movements unhurried and deliberate. "That's quite the watch you've got there," he remarked, his voice low enough that only Ethan could hear. Ethan's eyes flicked down to the watch. "It showed up this morning. Don't know who left it," the stranger smiled faintly. "Sometimes, The universe has a way of rewarding those who've endured the most. He glanced at Ethan, his gaze piercing. You've been through a lot, haven't you? Ethan nodded. More than most. Then you'll understand this, the stranger said, his voice taking on a weight that seemed to echo in the air. The watch isn't just a gift. It's a sign, and it's about to change everything. Ethan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Before the stranger could answer, a loud commotion erupted behind them. Travis, frustrated by the growing resistance of the crowd and his own crew, grabbed the watch from Ethan's hands. If it's so special, maybe I'll just keep it for myself, he sneered. The moment Travis's fingers closed around the watch, he froze. His eyes widened, and he staggered back as if struck by an invisible force. The crowd gasped as the watch fell from his hands, landing with a dull thud on the pavement. What the hell was that? Travis muttered, clutching his chest. His face had gone pale, and he looked genuinely frightened for the first time. The stranger rose to his feet, his expression calm but firm. That's what happens when you take what doesn't belong to you. Travis glared at him, his bravado crumbling. Who are you? He demanded, his voice shaky. The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Ethan, picking up the watch and placing it back in his hands. Keep it close, he said softly. Then, addressing the crowd, he added, Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can ripple into something much greater. The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by the events unfolding before them. Mikey stepped forward, his face conflicted. Travis, maybe we should just let it go. Travis opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of the moment and the judgmental eyes of the crowd silenced him. He motioned for his crew to follow, muttering under his breath as he stomped away. Mikey hesitated, his gaze lingering on Ethan and the stranger. Finally, he turned and followed the others. His shoulders slumped. As the crowd began to disperse, the stranger helped Ethan to his feet. You've got more strength than you know, he said, his voice warm. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Ethan nodded, his grip on the watch firm. Who are you? The stranger smiled faintly. Just someone who believes in second chances. And with that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers, and a feeling that his life was about to take a turn he never could have anticipated. As the crowd thinned, Ethan stood on the edge of the square, still clutching the watch. His mind buzzed with questions. Who was that stranger? Why had Travis been so shaken by the watch? And most importantly, what did the stranger mean about the watch being a sign? Ethan looked down at the intricate device in his hand. It gleamed faintly under the setting sun, its face etched with tiny symbols that didn't resemble any language he'd ever seen. When he tilted it, the symbols seemed to shift, like they were alive. He turned it over, noticing an engraving on the back for the first time. Courage brings clarity. He whispered the words to himself, feeling an odd sense of warmth in his chest. The day had started like any other, filled with challenges and loneliness, but now everything felt charged with possibility. That night, Ethan lay on his usual bench under the awning of an old bookstore. The streets were quiet, but the encounter with Travis and the stranger replayed endlessly in his mind. Sleep eluded him. He traced the edge of the watch, its ticking somehow soothing despite the chaos of his thoughts. Suddenly, the watch began to glow faintly, casting a soft blue light onto his hands. Ethan sat up, heart racing, and stared at it. The hands of the watch spun wildly before coming to an abrupt halt. The glowing faded, but the air around him seemed different, thicker, almost humming with energy. What the? Ethan muttered. He heard a faint rustling nearby. Turning his head sharply, he spotted a figure stepping out of the shadows. It wasn't Travis or any of the Iron Crew. This man was tall and lean, dressed in an impeccable suit that seemed completely out of place in the gritty streets of the city. His face was obscured by the brim of a wide hat, but his voice was smooth and deliberate. Interesting, the man said, his tone betraying a hint of amusement. The watch chose you. Ethan stood, gripping the watch tighter. Who are you? The man stepped closer, his movements unhurried but precise. A friend. Or at least, I could be. Ethan took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run. What do you want? The watch, of course, the man said, tilting his head slightly. It doesn't belong to you. Ethan's chest tightened. It was left for me, he said, his voice wavering but firm. I'm not giving it to anyone. The man chuckled softly. I see. You think it's a gift, a token of kindness. But you have no idea what you're holding, do you? Ethan's silence was answer enough. The man sighed, as if disappointed. Let me explain it simply. That watch is, let's call it a key, a very valuable key that many people would do anything to possess, including people far less polite than me. Ethan's grip on the watch tightened further. If it's so important, why was it left with me? Now that, the man said, his voice lowering, is the question, isn't it? His tone sharpened. I'll give you one chance. Hand it over, and I'll ensure your safety. Refuse and, well, let's just say things could get unpleasant. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced down at the watch, its smooth surface glinting faintly in the moonlight. The words engraved on the back, "Courage brings clarity," seemed to echo in his mind. He took a deep breath. No! The man's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly. That's unfortunate. Before Ethan could react, the man raised his hand, and a wave of force hit Ethan like a gust of wind, knocking him backward. He landed hard on the ground, the watch slipping from his hand and skittering across the pavement. The man stepped forward, reaching for it, but before he could grasp it, the watch emitted a sharp, piercing sound. The air around it shimmered, and the man recoiled as if burned. Impossible, the man muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. It's bonded with you. Ethan scrambled to his feet and grabbed the watch, holding it close. He didn't know what had just happened, but he wasn't about to let it go. The man's expression hardened. You've made your choice, but this isn't over. He tipped his hat, his tone suddenly calm again. I hope you're ready for what comes next. With that, the man turned and walked into the shadows, disappearing as suddenly as he'd appeared. Ethan stood there, his body trembling with adrenaline. The watch felt warm in his hand, its ticking steady and deliberate. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, it was far bigger than he could have imagined. He looked up at the sky, where clouds had gathered to obscure the stars. In his heart, he knew one thing for certain. The stranger was right. This wasn't over. The city stirred to life the next morning as sunlight broke through the narrow gaps between towering buildings. Ethan sat on his usual bench, clutching the watch, his thoughts racing. The encounter from the night before played in his mind over and over. Who was that man? What did he mean about the watch being a key? And why had the watch reacted when he tried to take it? For Ethan, a night of restless vigilance had replaced sleep. He kept scanning the streets, every shadow and passerby a potential threat. The bustling noise of the city, once background to his daily struggles, now felt overwhelming. Every honk, shout, and clang of metal seemed like a warning. He ran his fingers over the watch's smooth surface, tracing the intricate symbols etched into its face. Despite his fear, he couldn't deny the feeling deep in his gut. This watch was important, and somehow it had chosen him. By mid-morning, Ethan decided he needed answers. He thought of the stranger's cryptic words, "Courage brings clarity." If he wanted clarity, he'd have to find it himself. The first person that came to mind was Travis. As much as Ethan resented the bandit leader, Travis's reaction to the watch had been too intense to ignore. He clearly knew something. With hesitant steps, Ethan made his way to the Iron Crew's usual hangout, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The closer he got, the heavier his chest felt, but determination kept his feet moving. The warehouse loomed before him, its rusted metal exterior a stark reminder of his last encounter with Travis. He approached cautiously, slipping inside through a side door. The air smelled of oil and cigarette smoke. Ethan could hear muffled voices coming from the main area. Peering around a corner, he saw the Iron Crew gathered. Travis sat at the center, sharpening a blade. His lieutenants, Bo, the bruiser with a scar that ran from his temple to his chin, and Slim, a wiry man with a cigarette perpetually dangling from his lips, were talking in low voices. They didn't notice Ethan as he slipped closer. "I'm telling you, boss," Slim was saying, "if that watch is what I think it is, we're in deep trouble. I heard stories about people dying over things like that." Travis waved him off, his voice sharp. "Stories. That's all they are. What matters is getting it back." Bo frowned. "And if that kid doesn't give it up?" Travis's smile was cold. "He will. Everyone has a breaking point." Ethan's stomach churned. His grip tightened on the watch as he realized just how much danger he was in, but he needed more information. Summoning his courage, he stepped into the open. "Looking for this," he called out, holding up the watch. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Travis's expression twisted into a mix of surprise and fury. Well, Travis said, standing slowly. The little stray found his way back. Slim and Bo moved to block Ethan's escape, but he stood his ground. What is this watch, Travis? Why is everyone after it? Travis laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've got guts, kid, I'll give you that, but you're in way over your head. Then explain it to me, Ethan demanded, his voice shaking but firm. Why does it matter so much? Travis eyed him, his expression calculating. You don't know, do you? You're holding something that could change the balance of power in this city, maybe even beyond it, and you have no clue. Ethan's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Travis gestured to the watch. That thing isn't just some fancy antique, it's connected to the kind of people who run things from the shadows. It's worth more than you could ever imagine, and it's dangerous in the wrong hands. Then why do you want it? Ethan shot back. Because, Travis said, stepping closer, I'd rather have that power in my hands than let it destroy me. Hand it over, and I might let you walk out of here. Ethan hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't trust Travis, but if the watch was truly as powerful as he said, giving it up could mean protecting himself. But then the stranger's words came back to him. It's bonded with you. The watch had reacted to him, chosen him. If he gave it up, who knew what could happen? No, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. You're not getting it. Travis's smile turned predatory. Wrong answer. Before Ethan could react, Bo lunged at him. Instinctively, Ethan raised the watch, and once again, it glowed with that faint blue light. Bo froze mid-step, his face contorted in pain as if an invisible force was holding him back. Slim stumbled away, cursing under his breath. What the hell is that thing? Slim hissed. Travis's confidence wavered for the first time. That shouldn't be possible. Ethan seized the moment, sprinting for the exit while the Iron Crew was still stunned. He didn't stop running until he was several blocks away, ducking into an alley to catch his breath. His heart pounded as the reality of the situation sank in. Travis had confirmed it. This watch was far more than it seemed, and now, more than ever, Ethan knew he had to figure out its true purpose before someone else got to him. Ethan crouched in the shadow of a fire escape, his breath visible in the cold morning air. His pulse still raced from his encounter with Travis, but the revelation had only deepened the mystery. The watch wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous. And it was now clear that whoever wielded it would find themselves entangled in a web of power, secrets, and enemies. As he regained his composure, Ethan heard a soft voice behind him. You've stirred the pot, haven't you? He spun around to see a woman standing a few feet away. She was in her mid-30s, dressed in a leather jacket and dark jeans, her presence sharp yet unassuming, her piercing green eyes locked onto the watch in his hand. Who are you? Ethan demanded, backing away. Relax, she said, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. The name's Lena. Let's just say I have a vested interest in that artifact you're holding. Ethan narrowed his eyes, gripping the watch tighter. What do you want? To help, Lena replied, stepping closer. Though I'd understand if you don't believe me. I've been tracking the watch for years. You're not the first person to come into contact with it, but you might be the first it's chosen. Chosen? Ethan echoed, confused. Lena nodded. That's not just any old timepiece. It's called the Meridian Key. It's an artifact connected to something ancient, something powerful. Most people who touch it can't activate it, let alone bond with it. But you, the fact that it responded to you means you're different. Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling up. Everyone keeps saying that, but no one explains why. What does it do? Lena hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't being followed. The short version. The key is said to unlock something buried deep within the city, a hidden chamber, a vault. No one knows for sure, but the legends say that what's inside could shift the balance of power for whoever controls it. Ethan stared at her, disbelief mingling with a tinge of dread. That sounds like a story from a movie, doesn't it? Lena agreed, her tone dry. Except people have killed for less, and now you're in the middle of it. As they spoke, Ethan's unease grew. He didn't trust Lena, but she seemed to know more than anyone else he'd encountered so far. And if what she said was true, the key had drawn him into something far larger than himself. So, why help me? Ethan asked warily. Because you don't have a clue what you're dealing with, Lena said bluntly. You're in over your head, and Travis isn't the only one after you. There are others, people far worse than him. They won't stop until they get that key. Ethan frowned. Why don't they just take it from me? They can't. Not as long as it's bonded to you. Lena's voice softened. Look, I know this is overwhelming, but I can help you figure out what's going on. I've studied the Meridian key for years. I know where to start. Ethan considered her offer, the weight of the watch heavy in his hand. He didn't have many options. If Lena was telling the truth, she might be his only chance to understand the key and survive the forces now pursuing him. Fine, he said reluctantly. What's the plan? Lena led Ethan to an inconspicuous bookstore tucked between two apartment buildings. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, the air inside thick with the scent of old paper and leather bindings. The shop was cluttered, with shelves crammed full of books on history, mythology, and conspiracy theories. Behind the counter stood a wiry man with round glasses and a nervous energy. He looked up as they approached, his expression brightening when he saw Lena. Lena, I didn't expect you back so soon. Something came up, Simon, Lena said, gesturing to Ethan. We need access to your archives. Simon's gaze shifted to Ethan, lingering on the watch in his hand. His eyes widened. Is that? It is, Lena confirmed. And we don't have much time. Simon nodded quickly, locking the front door and flipping the sign to closed. He led them to the back of the shop, where a hidden staircase descended into a dimly lit basement. The basement walls were lined with shelves of dusty tomes and scrolls. In the center of the room stood a large table covered in maps, sketches, and notes. This is where I've been piecing it all together, Simon explained, his voice tinged with excitement. The Meridian key has been linked to myths and legends all over the world, but every trail leads back to New York. Ethan approached the table, scanning the documents. One map caught his eye, an old, faded depiction of the city with strange symbols marked in various locations. What are these? He asked, pointing to the symbols. Sites tied to the key, Simon explained. Places where people have claimed to see strange phenomena. If the key is meant to unlock something, it's probably one of these spots. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The symbols weren't random. They formed a rough pattern, like a constellation etched across the city. As Simon and Lena discussed their next steps, Ethan's thoughts turned to the dangers ahead. Travis, the other bandits, and now these unknown forces Lena had mentioned. It felt like the whole city was closing in on him. But for the first time, he had allies, however tenuous. Together, they might just stand a chance of uncovering the truth behind the key. Ethan sat at the cluttered table in Simon's basement, staring at the map and its constellation of symbols. Each mark represented a mystery, a piece of a puzzle whose stakes were far higher than he ever imagined. Despite the warmth of the room, a cold dread settled in his chest. Why me? He asked, his voice low. Why did this thing pick me? Lena glanced up from a stack of notes, her green eyes softening. The key doesn't pick at random. There's something about you, your character, your instincts, that makes you the right person. Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. But I'm nobody. I'm just a guy trying to get by. I didn't ask for any of this. That's exactly why it chose you, Simon interjected, pushing his glasses up his nose. The legends say the key seeks out those with pure intentions. It doesn't want power-hungry tyrants or opportunists. It wants someone who won't abuse its potential. Pure intentions? Ethan let out a bitter laugh. I'm not some hero. I was barely holding it together before all this. Lena walked over, pulling out a chair to sit across from him. Listen, Ethan. Everyone starts somewhere. I've seen people who didn't believe they were capable of anything rise to challenges they never imagined. And you've already done that. You stood up to Travis. You protected that homeless man. You're not giving yourself enough credit. Ethan looked away, his grip tightening around the watch. The weight of her words felt heavier than the artifact itself. Could he really be what they claimed? A person capable of carrying this responsibility? Meanwhile, Simon tapped on a dusty computer, bringing up scanned documents and cryptic diagrams. We don't have much time to ponder existential questions, he said, his voice tinged with urgency. I've cross-referenced the map with historical records, and I think I've narrowed down our first location. Lena leaned over his shoulder. Where? Simon pointed to a mark near the Hudson River. Here. It's an old shipping yard. According to my research, it was owned by a secretive consortium in the 1800s, rumored to have ties to ancient relics. A shipping yard? Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. Doesn't sound like the kind of place where you'd find something world-changing. That's the point, Lena said. Who would think to look there? The best secrets are hidden in plain sight. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Fine. Let's check it out. The three of them piled into Lena's beat-up SUV, driving through the darkened streets of New York. The city buzzed with its usual energy, but to Ethan, everything felt sharper, more alive. Every shadow could be hiding a threat, every corner a new challenge. As they neared the shipping yard, Ethan couldn't shake his unease. What if this is a trap? What if Travis or someone else is already there? Lena glanced at him in the rearview mirror. It's possible, but that's why we're being careful. Simon and I have been in worse situations. We'll figure it out. Worse situations? Ethan asked skeptically. Like what? Lena hesitated, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. Let's just say this isn't my first time chasing something dangerous. I used to be an archaeologist. I thought I could make a difference, uncover history's greatest mysteries, but not every treasure is worth the cost. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, Ethan glimpsed a vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. He wanted to ask more, but the SUV came to a stop. We're here, Lena announced. The shipping yard was a sprawling maze of rusted containers and abandoned warehouses. The smell of saltwater and oil hung heavy in the air. Lena parked in a shadowed corner, and they stepped out into the cold night. Simon adjusted his backpack, pulling out a handheld scanner. This thing should pick up any unusual energy signatures. If the key's connected to something here, we'll know. Ethan looked around, his nerves on edge. The place felt wrong, too quiet, too still. As they moved deeper into the yard, a faint sound reached his ears. The creak of metal, the shuffle of footsteps. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Lena froze, her hand going to the knife strapped to her belt. "We're not alone." Simon glanced nervously at the scanner. "We need to move fast. Whatever's here, we're close." The group pressed on, the tension thickening with every step. They stopped in front of a massive container marked with faded symbols. Simon's scanner lit up, its beeping growing rapid. "This is it," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Lena examined the container, running her fingers over the symbols. "These markings, they're ancient, older than anything I've seen before." Ethan stepped back, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. "We need to get out of here now." "Not yet," Lena said, pulling at the container's heavy door. With a groan, it slid open, revealing a dark interior. Inside was a pedestal, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. Resting on top was an object covered in a black cloth. Simon reached for it, but Ethan grabbed his arm. "Don't," Ethan warned. "What if it's—" Before he could finish, a voice echoed through the yard. "Well, well, looks like we're not the only ones who know about the key." Ethan spun around to see Travis and his gang emerging from the shadows, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Behind them stood a larger group, figures dressed in tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. Lena cursed under her breath. "They've brought reinforcements." Ethan's heart pounded as the bandits surrounded them, cutting off any escape. The stakes had just risen, and the choices they made in the next moments could determine everything. Travis stepped forward, his smirk illuminated by the flickering beam of a flashlight one of his men held steady. He made no effort to conceal the pistol tucked into his waistband, though he rested his hand casually on it. "Well, if it isn't our reluctant hero and his merry little band," he drawled. "You know, Ethan, I thought you'd have more sense than to stick your nose into business that doesn't concern you." Ethan clenched his fists, the weight of the key in his pocket feeling heavier than ever. "I'm not the one tearing apart the city looking for something I barely understand." "Oh, I understand it just fine," Travis shot back, his smirk hardening into a glare. "And I'm willing to bet that thing in your pocket is the reason you're still alive." Simon took a small step back, positioning himself subtly between the pedestal and Travis's group. His hand trembled on the strap of his bag, where a concealed smoke grenade sat ready. Lena, meanwhile, slowly unsheathed her knife, her movements deliberate and practiced. "I'm giving you one chance," Travis said, his voice dropping into a growl. "Hand over the key and maybe I'll let you walk out of here." "And what about them?" Ethan asked, jerking his head toward the masked reinforcements. "They're not exactly here for negotiation," Travis chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Those guys, they don't care about you. They care about results. So why don't you make this easy for everyone?" Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as one of the masked figures stepped forward. Unlike Travis and his gang, This person moved with the precision of someone trained for far more dangerous missions. His voice, and when he spoke, was cold and calculated. "Mr. Travis has his personal motives," the man said, tilting his head toward the bandit leader. "But for us, the key is an asset, a strategic one. We will have it, one way or another." Simon's eyes widened as the scanner in his hand began to beep erratically. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice urgent. "Something's happening." Ethan glanced at the pedestal, where faint blue light began to seep out from beneath the black cloth. The air around them grew heavy, charged with an unnatural energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. "What's going on?" Lena hissed, her grip tightening on her knife. Simon stared at the scanner, panic flashing across his face. "It's reacting to the key. They're connected, probably tuned to the same energy source." Travis's smirk faltered as the glow intensified. "What the hell is that?" Before anyone could answer, a deep rumbling shook the ground beneath them. The container creaked ominously, the sound reverberating through the shipping yard. From the pedestal, a faint hum grew louder, rising into a frequency that seemed to pierce the very air. The masked leader didn't hesitate. "Move in!" he barked, and his men surged forward. "Ethan, don't let them near that thing!" Simon shouted, lunging toward the pedestal. Travis's gang drew their weapons, splitting into two groups, one heading for the trio, the other flanking the masked operatives. Chaos erupted as Lena launched herself into action, moving with fluid efficiency. She knocked a pistol out of one bandit's hand, pivoted, and drove her elbow into another's throat. Ethan scrambled to avoid a masked operative who lunged for him, narrowly ducking behind a crate. The key in his pocket pulsed, its vibrations matching the hum from the pedestal. "Ethan," Lena called, her voice sharp, "get the key out of here." "I can't just—" he began, but a masked figure cut him off, forcing him to dodge a brutal punch. Simon managed to yank the black cloth off the pedestal, revealing a small metallic cube etched with symbols that seemed to ripple and change. The glow it emitted now bathed the entire container in an eerie blue light. "What is that thing?" Travis bellowed, backing away from the pedestal. "It's a conduit," Simon shouted, his voice strained as he dodged a blow. "It's amplifying the key's energy." The masked leader's attention snapped to the pedestal. "Secure the artifact," he ordered, his men pivoting their focus. "Over my dead body," Lena growled, positioning herself in front of the glowing cube. As the battle raged, Ethan found himself cornered by one of the masked operatives. The man raised a taser, his movements precise and unrelenting. In desperation, Ethan grabbed a nearby metal pipe and swung it wildly. The operative dodged easily, but the pipe struck a crate, sending a cascade of cans tumbling to the ground. The noise momentarily distracted his opponent, giving Ethan an opening. He lunged forward, managing to knock the taser out of the man's hand. The operative stumbled, and Ethan turned to run, but he froze as the key in his pocket began to glow, its light matching the pedestals. A sudden surge of heat coursed through him, followed by an overwhelming sense of clarity. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the key. It hovered above his palm, vibrating with power. "What are you doing?" Simon screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Ethan didn't answer. The key seemed to guide his movements as he stepped toward the pedestal. He could feel its pull, a magnetic force urging him forward. The masked leader saw the key and shouted, "Stop him!" Before anyone could react, Ethan placed the key onto the pedestal. The blue light flared, blinding everyone in the container. The hum became a deafening roar, and the ground buckled beneath their feet. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had been swallowed by the light. Then, silence. When the light subsided, an eerie stillness filled the container. Ethan stood at the pedestal, the key now fused seamlessly into its surface. The glow had diminished to a faint shimmer, but the air remained charged with a strange energy. Around him, everyone was reeling, bandits, operatives, and his companions alike. "What just happened?" Simon whispered, his voice shaky as he pushed himself up from the floor. "I don't know," Ethan muttered, staring at his hand. It tingled as though a low current was still running through it. "It felt like it wanted me to do that." "You might have just activated something we can't stop," Lena hissed, hauling herself to her feet. Her eyes darted to the masked operatives, who were regrouping, their leader barking orders. "And we're not the only ones interested in what comes next." The masked leader, his composure rattled but not broken, pointed toward the pedestal. "Secure the artifact and the boy. Whatever just happened, We need to contain it. Travis, shaking off his own daze, let out a humorless laugh. Contain it? You've got no clue what you're dealing with, do you? He motioned for his gang to block the operative's path. If anyone's taking this thing, it's us. Ethan looked at Lena, panic rising in his chest. They're going to tear each other apart. Let them, she said grimly, pulling him toward the container door. It gives us time to figure out our next move. Outside, the shipping yard was bathed in moonlight. Simon stumbled as he followed Ethan and Lena, clutching the scanner that now beeped erratically. That pedestal, whatever it is, it's connected to a larger network. The energy spike isn't localized anymore, it's spreading. What does that even mean? Ethan demanded, glancing over his shoulder. Inside the container, shouting turned to chaos as gunfire erupted between Travis's gang and the operatives. It means this isn't just about the key anymore, Simon said. We've triggered something bigger, something ancient, and I don't think we're ready for it. Lena stopped abruptly, pulling them into the shadow of a nearby container. We need to regroup, think. If we run blindly, we're as good as caught. Regroup where? Ethan asked. They'll chase us no matter where we go. Simon hesitated, then pulled out his tablet, tapping rapidly. There's an abandoned observatory about 10 miles from here. It was built on a ley line, one of the energy channels the key seems to be drawing from. If we can get there, we might be able to figure out what's happening. An observatory? Lena raised an eyebrow. Sounds risky. So is staying here, Simon snapped. We don't have time to argue. Lena sighed and nodded. Fine, let's move. Back in the container, the fight was escalating. Travis ducked behind a crate as a bullet whizzed past his ear. So you've got some nerve bringing guns to my turf, he shouted, firing blindly toward the operatives. The masked leader ignored him, his focus fixed on the pedestal. He motioned for 2 of his men to cover him as he approached it cautiously. The key pulsed faintly, its energy rippling like water under the surface of a calm lake. Careful, one of the operatives warned. We don't know what it's capable of. I'll tell you what it's capable of, Travis growled, appearing suddenly behind them. He swung a crowbar with brutal force, knocking one operative unconscious. Before he could land another blow, the leader spun, disarming him with practiced ease. Pathetic, the leader muttered, aiming his weapon at Travis. But before he could fire, a sudden tremor shook the ground, sending both men sprawling. From the pedestal, a new light emerged, red this time, streaking up toward the sky like a beacon. Everyone froze, their gazes following the column of light as it pierced the clouds. What the hell is that? One of the bandits muttered, his voice trembling. The masked leader's eyes widened. A signal. Ethan, Lena, and Simon watched the red light from a distance, its glow casting an ominous hue over the shipping yard. The sight made Ethan's stomach twist. What did I do? He murmured. You didn't do this alone, Lena said, her voice firm. Whatever's happening, it's been waiting for centuries. You just opened the door. That's not comforting, Ethan muttered. Simon stared at the light, his face pale. This changes everything. The key isn't just a tool, it's a marker. Something's responding to it. Responding how? Lena asked sharply. Simon shook his head. I don't know, but if the legends are right, we're not just dealing with relics. We're dealing with forces beyond anything we understand. As they reached the SUV, Ethan hesitated, his hand lingering on the door handle. What if we're too late? What if we can't stop this? Lena placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression steely. We're not too late. And we don't stop just because it's hard. You didn't give up on that homeless man, did you? Ethan shook his head. Then don't give up now. With a determined nod, Ethan climbed into the SUV, the weight of the key in his pocket, a constant reminder of the stakes. Inside the container, the masked leader stood over the pedestal, his hand hovering above it. If this is a signal, he said quietly, then something, or someone, is coming. Travis, blood dripping from a cut above his eye, spat on the ground. Whoever it is, I hope they like surprises. The pedestal flared again, this time emitting a low, resonant hum. The air vibrated with tension as both men realized the same chilling truth. This was just the beginning. The SUV roared down the empty highway, its tires skimming the cracked asphalt. Ethan sat in the back seat, watching the ominous red light in the sky grow dimmer as they sped away. His mind raced with fragmented thoughts, what the key truly was, why he felt so connected to it, and what the activation meant. 10 miles, Simon muttered, checking the map on his tablet. If we stay on this road, We'll reach the observatory in about 15 minutes. Lena gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. We don't have 15 minutes if those operatives or the bandits are following us. Do you think they are? Ethan asked, glancing nervously out the back window. They'd be stupid not to, Lena replied. We've got something everyone wants. And I don't think any of them plan to play nice. Back at the shipping yard, the chaos had reached its peak. The column of red light had faded, but the damage was done. Both Travis's gang and the operatives had ceased their battle, their attention focused on the pedestal. This thing's calling something, Travis muttered, glaring at the masked leader. And I don't think it's friendly. The masked leader ignored him, instead speaking into his radio. Base, we need immediate reinforcements. Something's been activated, and we're no longer in control of the situation. The response was immediate, but chilling. Reinforcements are already en route. Contain the situation at all costs. Contain it, Travis barked. Do you even know what you're dealing with? Before the leader could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A low guttural sound echoed through the air, a rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The pedestal's faint glow intensified, and the vibrations grew stronger. Something's coming, the masked leader muttered, his voice tinged with unease. Travis took a step back, his bravado faltering. If you've got a plan, now's the time to share it. The leader didn't answer. He was already running. At the observatory, the group pulled up to a crumbling structure perched on a rocky hill. The building's once imposing dome was riddled with cracks, and weeds grew unchecked around its base. Lena killed the engine, and they climbed out, their breath visible in the crisp night air. This place looks like it hasn't been used in decades, Ethan said, his voice tinged with doubt. Which makes it the perfect place to hide, Simon replied, already unloading equipment from the SUV. If the key is connected to the ley lines, this observatory might give us the answers we need. They hurried inside, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air smelled of dust and decay, and the only light came from the moon streaming through broken windows. Simon set up his gear near the center of the room, where a rusted telescope stood like a silent sentinel. Help me connect this, Simon said, handing Ethan a cable. We need to sync the scanner to the key's energy output. Lena stood near the door, her eyes scanning the horizon. We're exposed here. If anyone followed us, they'll have to get through me first, a voice interrupted. The group spun around, and there, silhouetted in the doorway, was Travis. His face was bruised and bloodied, but his eyes burned with determination. How did you find us? Lena demanded, drawing her pistol. You didn't exactly cover your tracks, he sneered. And besides, you've got something that belongs to me. Ethan clutched the key in his pocket, his heart pounding. This doesn't belong to anyone. Travis smirked, stepping inside. That's where you're wrong, kid. That thing's worth more than you can imagine. So how about you hand it over, and maybe we all walk out of here alive? Not a chance, Lena growled, raising her gun. Travis laughed darkly. You really think you can stop me? My guys are just outside. Then why are you in here alone? Simon asked, his voice shaking. The smirk faded from Travis's face, replaced by a flicker of doubt. They'll be here soon enough. No, they won't, Lena said coldly, stepping closer. We know about the reinforcements. They're not coming for you. They're coming for the key. Before Travis could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. Simon's scanner emitted a shrill beep, and the rusted telescope began to creak ominously. It's happening again, Simon said, his voice rising in panic. The key's energy is spiking. It's pulling from the ley lines. Ethan pulled the key from his pocket, its surface glowing brightly. What do I do? You've already done enough, Travis shouted, lunging for him. Lena fired a warning shot, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Back off! Travis froze, his hands raised, but the moment was short-lived. Outside, a deafening roar echoed across the hills, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Something massive was approaching, and its presence was undeniable. Simon stared at the scanner, his face pale. That's not reinforcements. Ethan looked at Lena, fear etched into his features. What did we wake up? She didn't answer. She was already aiming her gun at the door, bracing herself for what was to come. The air around the observatory thickened as the roaring outside grew louder. It wasn't the rumble of engines or the thudding of heavy boots. It was deeper, resonating with a guttural intensity that felt like it was coming from the earth itself. What is that? Travis muttered, his bravado crumbling as he backed toward the wall. It's what the key summoned, Simon said, his voice tight with terror. And if we don't figure out how to stop it, It's going to tear this place apart. Lena kept her gun trained on the door, her stance unwavering. Simon, get us a solution, now! Simon frantically tapped at his tablet, sweat dripping down his temple. The scanner's picking up massive energy spikes around us. It's like the ley lines are converging here. If the key keeps feeding into it, it's going to create a breach. A breach to what? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. Another dimension? Another time? I don't know, Simon snapped. But whatever it is, it's not good. Outside, the source of the roar finally revealed itself. From the darkness emerged a hulking figure, its shape barely human. It towered over the trees, its limbs elongated and clawed, its eyes glowing with the same red hue that had erupted from the pedestal. The operatives, who had been closing in on the observatory's location, froze in their tracks. "What in God's name is that?" one of them whispered, his gun trembling in his hands. "It's not from God," their leader said grimly. "Hold your ground. We need that key." The creature let out another roar, shaking the ground as it advanced. Without hesitation, it swung one massive arm, sending a group of operatives flying into the air like ragdolls. The rest scattered, their weapons useless against its sheer size and strength. Inside the observatory, the group heard the chaos outside. Travis's face was pale as he gestured wildly toward the door. "That thing's going to kill us all. We need to get out of here." "Running won't help," Lena said sharply. "If it's after the key, it'll follow us." Ethan's grip on the key tightened. "Then I'll give it what it wants." "No!" Lena and Simon shouted in unison. "You don't even know what it wants," Simon added. "Giving it the key could make things worse." "Or it could stop this," Ethan argued. "If the key is the reason it's here, then maybe—" "It's not about the key," Lena interrupted, her voice firm. "It's about control. That thing out there, it's not just here because of the key. It's here because someone woke it up." Travis's head snapped toward her. "You think the operatives did this? They were after the key for a reason," Lena said, "and I'm betting they knew exactly what it could do." The door to the observatory burst open, and one of the operatives stumbled inside, blood streaming down his face. "It's coming," he gasped, collapsing to the floor. "You have to stop it." "What do you think we're trying to do?" Lena snapped, kicking the door shut behind him. She turned to Simon. "Tell me you've got something." Simon stared at his tablet, his expression grim. "The key isn't just a power source. It's a beacon. It's been sending out signals this entire time, pulling energy from the ley lines to amplify them. So shut it off," Lena barked. "I can't," Simon shouted. "It's bonded to Ethan now. He's the only one who can deactivate it." Ethan's eyes widened. "Deactivate it? How?" Simon hesitated. "You'll have to connect with it, mentally. The key isn't just a physical object. It's tied to you now, to your thoughts and emotions. You have to will it to stop." The building shook as the creature slammed into the side, its claws raking against the walls. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the group braced themselves. "We're out of time," Lena said, grabbing Ethan by the shoulders. "Listen to me. You can do this. You've already connected with the key once. Just focus. Block out everything else." Ethan's hands trembled as he held the key. "What if I fail?" "You won't," Lena said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." Another crash rocked the building, and Travis let out a yelp. "You better hurry, kid, or none of us are walking out of here." Ethan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The key's surface was warm, almost alive. As he focused on it, he felt a pull, like a thread unraveling in his mind, drawing him deeper into the connection. Images flashed before him, ancient civilizations, powerful storms, and the pedestal glowing with energy. He saw the creature, not as it was now, but as a chained force, bound and contained by an intricate network of energy. "I see it," Ethan murmured. "I see what I have to do." Outside, the creature let out a deafening roar as it prepared to strike the building again. But before it could, the red glow surrounding it began to waver. Its movements slowed, and it looked toward the observatory with a mix of rage and confusion. Inside, Ethan's body shook as the key pulsed in his hands. "It's fighting me," he said through gritted teeth. "It doesn't want to be controlled." "You have to push through," Lena urged. "You're stronger than it is." Ethan's face twisted with concentration as he forced his will upon the key. The glow in its surface flickered, then dimmed. Outside, the creature let out one final roar before collapsing to the ground, its form disintegrating into ash. The room fell silent as the key's light faded completely. Ethan opened his eyes, his body trembling but unharmed. "I did it," he whispered. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You did." But before they could celebrate, Simon's tablet beeped with a new alert. Guys?" That was just the first wave. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the cracks in the battered observatory walls, the group took a collective breath of relief. The key lay dormant in Ethan's trembling hands, its surface now dull and lifeless. But Simon's urgent tones snapped them back to reality. "That creature wasn't the only thing awakened," Simon said, his fingers flying over the tablet. "The key's signal didn't just draw one guardian. There's more activity, and it's coming straight for us." "More of those things?" Travis asked, his voice quivering. "How many?" Simon swallowed hard. 3, maybe 4. And they're converging fast. Lena's sharp instincts took over. "We can't stay here. This place is compromised. We need to move now." Ethan shook his head, still pale and shaken from his encounter with the key. "Move where? If they're tracking the signal, it doesn't matter where we go. They'll find us." "Not if we destroy the beacon," Lena countered, her gaze falling on the key. "Whatever tethered them to us is still active. We end that, and we end this." "But I just shut it down," Ethan argued. "It's not doing anything anymore," Simon interjected, his voice edged with urgency. "The key isn't like a normal device you can just turn off. Its energy has saturated this area, feeding into the ley lines for who knows how long. Even dormant, it's still a beacon. We have to sever it completely." "How do we do that?" Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Simon hesitated. "There's only one way. Return the key to its source." A tense silence fell over the group as the weight of Simon's words sank in. Lena was the first to speak. "You mean the pedestal?" Simon nodded. "It's not just a holding place, it's a containment field. The key wasn't meant to be removed, and putting it back might be the only way to cut off its signal." "That's miles away," Travis pointed out. "And last time I checked, the woods are crawling with those operatives, and now these things." Lena's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice. We either fight our way back or wait here and get picked off. You choose." Ethan clenched the key tightly, his resolve hardening despite the fear in his eyes. "Let's go." The group moved swiftly, slipping out through a concealed back exit of the observatory. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified as they made their way into the forest. The path they'd once used to escape now felt like a labyrinth, the shadows deeper and more menacing than before. Lena took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning for movement. Simon followed close behind, his tablet displaying real-time readings of the energy spikes. Ethan was in the middle, clutching the key as if it were his lifeline. Travis brought up the rear, his nervous glances darting to every rustling leaf. "Anything on the scanners?" Lena whispered. Simon shook his head. "Nothing yet, but the ley lines are fluctuating like crazy. They're getting closer." The group froze as a guttural growl echoed through the trees. From the darkness emerged a hulking figure, its silhouette far more terrifying than the creature they had faced earlier. This one was bulkier, its limbs gnarled and twisted like the roots of an ancient tree, its glowing red eyes locked onto them with predatory intent. "Move!" Lena barked, raising her gun. She fired a warning shot that barely grazed the creature, but it was enough to draw its attention. The group broke into a sprint, the creature crashing through the underbrush behind them. Lena fired over her shoulder, but her bullets seemed to have little effect. "It's not stopping. Keep going," Ethan shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "We're close." They burst into a clearing, and there it was, the pedestal bathed in an eerie glow as if it had been waiting for their return. The creature emerged moments later, its massive form blocking their escape route. Behind it, the faint sounds of the other creatures closing in sent shivers down their spines. "Ethan," Lena yelled, "get the key back in the pedestal." Ethan ran to the pedestal, his hands shaking as he tried to align the key with its slot. The creature roared, charging toward him. Lena stepped into its path, unloading her remaining bullets into its chest. It staggered but didn't stop, its claws swiping dangerously close to her. "Hurry, Ethan!" Simon shouted, throwing a rock at the creature in a futile attempt to distract it. "I'm trying," Ethan cried, fumbling with the key. "It's not fitting." The ground began to shake, the energy from the pedestal surging around them. The creature's roars echoed through the clearing as the other three arrived, circling like predators ready to strike. Simon's eyes widened as he stared at the pedestal. The alignment. "Ethan, you have to match the symbols on the key to the ones on the pedestal." Ethan's hands moved frantically, his eyes darting between the intricate symbols. The creatures inched closer, their claws digging into the earth as they prepared to pounce. Lena, out of bullets, grabbed a fallen branch and swung it at the closest creature, buying Ethan a few precious seconds. "Now, Ethan, do it now!" With a final twist, the key slid into place. A blinding light erupted from the pedestal, engulfing the clearing in a radiant glow. The creatures let out deafening roars, their forms disintegrating into ash as the light consumed them. The energy surged outward, washing over the forest like a cleansing wave. When the light faded, the key was gone. The pedestal stood silent, its glow extinguished. The forest was still. Ethan collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. "Is it over?" Lena helped him to his feet, her face softening with relief. "Yeah, kid, it's over." The forest was silent in the wake of the key's reactivation. The oppressive weight of energy that had pressed down on them for hours dissipated, replaced by an eerie calm. The pedestal now stood dormant, its once pulsing glow extinguished. Ethan stared at it, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "It's gone," Simon said, his voice tinged with awe as he checked his tablet. "The energy spikes, the signal, everything, it's all gone." "Then why does it feel like the ground's still shaking?" Travis asked, his voice trembling. They all froze, their senses heightened once more. But it wasn't the ground, it was their bodies, still vibrating with the adrenaline and fear that had carried them this far. Lena placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her gaze steady. "You did it, Ethan. Whatever power that thing had, you stopped it." Ethan looked up at her, his face pale but resolute. "I didn't do it alone." The group gathered near the pedestal, their exhaustion finally catching up to them. Simon sank onto a rock, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll be honest, I didn't think we'd make it." "Neither did I," Travis admitted, leaning against a tree. "And I still don't understand half of what just happened." Simon waved his tablet. "What just happened is we closed a dimensional breach, neutralized ancient energy, and, oh yeah, survived. That's the short version." "You're welcome," Lena muttered, sitting cross-legged on the ground, her gun now hanging loosely at her side. For the first time in hours, her guarded demeanor softened. "Travis, you might not have been the bravest back there, but you stuck it out. That counts for something." Travis snorted, though his smile was faint. "Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment." Ethan's gaze remained on the pedestal, his hands still trembling slightly. "What happens now?" Simon stood, his tablet still scanning the area. "The key's energy has been absorbed back into the pedestal. Without it, those creatures, or whatever they were, can't come through anymore. We've severed the connection." "But what if someone tries to take it again?" Ethan asked, his voice small. "They won't," Lena said firmly. "Not after tonight. Whatever power was here, it's gone now. The key is where it belongs. And anyone who comes looking won't find anything but this." She gestured to the pedestal, now a lifeless stone artifact. Its markings faded like memories lost to time. The distant sound of approaching voices broke their reprieve. Simon's eyes widened. "The operatives, they're still out there." Lena pushed herself to her feet, her senses sharpening once more. "They'll be looking for the key. When they find out it's gone, they'll come after us," Simon finished grimly. Ethan stepped forward, his exhaustion replaced by determination. "Then let's show them it's gone." "What are you talking about, kid?" Travis asked. "We bring them here," Ethan said. "Let them see for themselves that there's nothing left. They won't waste their time chasing something that's no longer here." Lena hesitated, her instincts warring with the logic of Ethan's plan. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but we do it on our terms." The group set up a calculated scene near the pedestal. They worked quickly, scattering remnants of their supplies and creating the illusion of a group that had stumbled upon the ancient artifact and inadvertently triggered its destruction. Simon ensured the remains of the creatures were nowhere to be found, erasing any evidence of what had occurred. By the time the operatives arrived, their weapons drawn and their leader barking orders, the group was waiting. Ethan stood at the forefront, his expression defiant. "So you're too late," he said, his voice steady. "It's over." The operatives' leader, a tall man with a hardened face, stepped forward. His gaze swept over the group, then landed on the pedestal. "Where's the key?" "Gone," Lena said flatly. "Returned to wherever it came from." The leader narrowed his eyes, suspicion flickering across his face. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Saved the world," Simon quipped, crossing his arms. "You're welcome." The operative's jaw tightened. but before he could speak, one of his men approached and whispered in his ear. The leader glanced at the lifeless pedestal again, then nodded reluctantly. "Let's move out," he barked. The operatives retreated into the forest, leaving the group in tense silence. When the last of their footsteps faded, Simon let out a breath of relief. "I can't believe that worked." "They're not stupid," Lena said. "They'll realize the truth soon enough. But by then we'll be long gone." Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You think they'll come back?" "Maybe," Lena admitted. "But they won't find anything. And they won't find us." As the sun rose over the forest, the group began their trek back towards civilization. Their steps were slower now, each of them carrying the weight of the night's events in their own way. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a quiet sense of accomplishment. Ethan walked beside Lena, his expression pensive. "Do you think anyone will ever know what happened here?" "Maybe someday," Lena said, "but not now. Some things are better left as mysteries." Simon chuckled softly. "At least it makes a great story." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, one worth remembering." The group reached the edge of the forest, just as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting long shadows on the quiet town below. The once ominous woods now felt peaceful, the chaos and terror of the night dissolving in the warmth of a new day. Ethan paused at the tree line, looking back at the dense forest that had been the setting for their harrowing adventure. For all its mysteries and dangers, it had also been the place where he discovered something profound, not just about the ancient artifact, but about himself and his ability to stand strong in the face of fear. "You all right, kid?" Lena asked, stopping beside him. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the trees one last time. "Yeah, just thinking about how different things feel now." Lena smirked. "That's what surviving does, changes your perspective." Simon caught up with them, his tablet tucked securely under his arm. "Speaking of change, we might want to make ourselves scarce for a while. No telling how long before those operatives circle back." Lena nodded in agreement. "We'll all need to lay low. But for now, I think we've earned some rest." The group descended into the town, each step taking them farther from the extraordinary events of the night and closer to the familiarity of their everyday lives. Yet, they all knew that things wouldn't be the same. Simon was the first to break the silence. "So, what's next for everyone?" "Back to pretending none of this happened," Travis laughed dryly. "That might work for you, tech guy. I still need a drink after all that." Lena glanced over at Ethan. "What about you?" Ethan hesitated, considering the question. For so long he'd felt like he didn't belong, like his differences set him apart in ways he couldn't overcome. But after what they'd endured together, he realized his strengths had played a critical role in their survival. "I think I'll be okay," he said finally, his voice steady. "I know I'm not like everyone else, but maybe that's not such a bad thing." "It's not," Simon said firmly. "Trust me. The world needs people who see things differently." Lena gave Ethan a rare smile, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "You're tougher than you think, kid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As they entered the town, a few early risers cast curious glances their way. To anyone else, they might have looked like a group of friends returning from a late-night hike. Only they knew the truth about what had transpired and the burden of secrets they now carried. Simon stopped at the crossroads where they would part ways. He adjusted his glasses, his usual playful smirk returning. "Well, folks, it's been weird, terrifying and weirdly exhilarating. Let's not do it again anytime soon." Travis snorted. "Speak for yourself. Next time, I'll bring backup." Lena rolled her eyes. "There won't be a next time. We made sure of that." Ethan looked at them all, a wave of gratitude washing over him. They'd started as strangers, brought together by chance and danger, but now they felt like something more. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." Lena ruffled his hair, a gesture that felt almost sisterly. "Don't mention it. Just keep being you." As Simon, Travis, and Lena went their separate ways, Ethan walked toward his house, the morning sun painting the world in golden light. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before, a quiet confidence that he'd carry with him. Reaching his front door, he paused and looked back at the horizon where the forest loomed in the distance. A small smile tugged at his lips. Whatever the future held, he knew he could face it. "Thank you for joining us on this epic journey. The courage, resilience, and teamwork we witnessed in this story remind us of the strength that lies within all of us, even when the odds seem insurmountable." If this story inspired you, Make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of adventure, mystery, and heart. What do you think Ethan's next chapter will look like? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And before you go, don't forget to check out our next video, where we'll dive into another thrilling story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until then, stay curious, stay courageous, and we'll see you in the next one.